Brian Gagnon is a doctoral candidate and adjunct faculty member in management, leadership, and organizational strategy. He's an adjunct faculty member at Clearly University, where he teaches undergraduate topics related to management, such as leadership. In the Intro to Leadership class, he teaches psychological safety and systems thinking as the foundations of leadership principles. And his topic today is an introduction to systems thinking. It's one of those topics that you can apply to many, many different kinds of fields. And so I'm really excited about this. We have never had anybody talk about this in Launchpad so far. Brian's academic background includes a Bachelor of Arts in Religion, a Master of Arts in Theological Studies, a Master of Arts in Executive Leadership, a Master of Philosophy in Management, and he is currently, as I said before, a doctoral candidate in management, leadership, and organizational strategy. He plans to be finished with his PhD by the end of this year. The emphasis of Brian's dissertation is describing the application of diversity, equity, and inclusion in business sectors not normally seen as being within the social norm. He served in the Navy for 4 years and the Army for another 3 years, or 4, it's kind of hard to figure that out. In the Navy, he was a hospital corpsman, while in the Army, he was in military intelligence. He has worked in the security industry and in the nonprofit sector. He brings a unique perspective of employment due to having been a security guard, a senior executive, and a professor. Without any more delay, let us get to Brian Gagnon. Brian, take it away.
All right. Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you. We can see you. Shannon's going to manipulate the view so that we see you full screen.
Oh, no, don't do that. I'll blind everybody with my bald spot. I put some contact information in the chat, and I'm more than willing to discuss any of this or anything related to my specializations with anybody after this presentation or throughout the coming weeks, months, even years. Networking is exceptionally important. As a matter of fact, that's how I got into teaching at the collegiate level. The dean of one of the programs happened to be a colleague of mine from my doctoral work, and we really hit it off, and yada, yada, yada. I believe in networking, so make sure you do that. Along with all these degrees, I also have a black belt in Six Sigma, which oddly enough, I've never used because everybody wants agile. So as you know, I teach leadership management. This includes ethics, other things that weren't mentioned, organizational behavior, corporate social responsibility, anything really related to the management field. So I compressed 312 pages of lecture notes from the class I teach, trying to find the best introduction to this subject. And I hope that I've been able to do it, and we have something fun to do at the end. So make sure you stick around for that. So let's begin to look at what a system is. You might say systems thinking, systems theory, why even bother? Well, after today, I think you will know. A system is something even from the subatomic, wow, that was an interesting one. Subatomic structures, bacterial colonies, algae colonies, anatomical systems in the bodies of animals and humans, the entire body of a human or an animal, acquaintanceships, friendships, relationships, informal social groups, organized social groups, including religious organizations, work teams, organizational departments, business organizations, nations, the entire human population, the globe, our solar system, our galaxy, and the universe. So you can see that there's always a system that's greater than the one that you're in. And so this applies to everything. Matter of fact, in my class, I use clips from the old TV show MASH, because the interconnections between the people are so easy to identify there. Plus, my students get to laugh. So systems thinking, it is grounded in complexity theory, evolutionary biology, graph theory, network theory, chaos theory, which is better known as nonlinear dynamical systems theory. That's just really long. So a system has 3 components, and we're going to look at these here in just a moment. But why would any of this be necessary for a group of individuals looking to enter the workforce. Well, no matter what position you're going to end up in, you're going to see that you fit into a system. You're going to see that you already belong to multiple systems. And these external systems impact your activity in your work system. For instance, let's say there's a guy named Bob, and he comes in, he's got a real bad attitude. He may not need to be written up. He just might need someone to sit down with him and to give him a safe space to talk. Because maybe in his family life, which is a system, or in his social groups with his friends, or his family, his greater family, his parents, there might be something that has happened and that's impacted him negatively, and he's brought that into the system at work. So all these systems within an organization, because we're looking at employment really and places of employment, they form together to create a greater system. So a team is a system, a department within a company is a system, the company is a system, the companies they do business with are systems that intersect into that system, and everything influences everything else. In my class, I discuss how, let me back up here. Okay, so what do we do with systems thinking? Well, we turn to systems theory. That's where it comes from. We look at the interconnections between people, elements, nodes, whatever you want to call them, could be policies. We look at the interconnections between them, and we don't look at it in a linear way like we've been taught. We do that at the beginning, but then we back up so we can look at it holistically and look at those interconnections in a non-linear way, because one cause could have a multitude of effects, and that cause could actually be an effect from a different cause. And so now things don't just turn 2 or 3 dimensional. Sometimes they can even turn 4 dimensional because there's time involved. And we miss these deeper meanings to what's going on within our team system or our business system or our family system, because we don't back up to look at it holistically. Okay, so the internet. The internet and social media has given rise to an instant dissemination of information. Not all of it is factual or has it been vetted. When it's not factual and not been vetted, it can have a disastrous consequence. One area that I use in my class to teach us is pulchronomics. You may have never heard that word before, but it's basically what marketing uses. How can attractiveness bring more profit? You see this a lot with content creators. They portray a successful life. They portray that they're perfect. Their hair is perfect. I don't have hair, but they have perfect hair. Their makeup is perfect. But you don't see the reality behind the scenes. They might live in a rundown trailer. Now, there's nothing wrong with living in a trailer. I grew up in a trailer park. But they're not showing the truth as it is. And then, typically, as studies have shown, young women in their teenage years and early 20s, early to mid 20s, are greatly impacted because they think that they must be like this content creator. And if they're not, then they're not successful. When they're not able to achieve that, they experience depression. So this is a way that systems thinking can identify these problems, these connections between depression in young women and content creators. So I just gave that as a brief example here at the beginning. So in every system that you are a part of, there are 5 or 6 components. You might be in one of those positions. There's the top. They're the leader. There's the middle. That's middle management. There's the bottom. They're the workers. You have what's called ends. This is typically found in a relationship or a friendship or even networking. And you might be in the middle, or you might be an end. And I'll define these a little bit better here in a minute. You also have a provider, which is somebody that provides a service or a product to the last category, the customer. So those are the the main components within a system. Now that you've got the real brief basis of what a system is made of, what a system kind of looks like, let's look at how we view these things. I was talking about a linear approach, the cause and effect. Why do we even think that way? Well, a lot of it comes from the Industrial Revolution. Scientific management emerged as a reductionist approach to evaluating and understanding business and organizations, and it was fueled by the Industrial Revolution. Frederick Winslow Taylor, he was a driving force behind this. Now, some of his work is very useful. He did a lot of work in motivation, but a lot of it's got to be filtered because he didn't care about child labor, working rights for women or for other minority groups. He just cared that the industry produced its product. And he looked for the quickest, easiest way to have that occur. So if that's the analytical approach, what do we do with systems theory? Which I say systems theory, but that includes systems thinking. It falls under complexity theory. But so if I say systems theory, I'm also talking about systems thinking in this instance. We look at these analytical cause and effect things, like I said before, but we back up and we look, how is everything connected? Are they connected through social media? Do they use phones? Do they talk in person? Is it positive? What psychological deficiencies might be in that relationship? Now, I'm not saying diagnosing individuals. I would never do that. I'm not a psychologist. But I have learned how to look for psychological problems that organizations or systems exemplify. And that's a little complicated, but you can find things, and I hate to say it, but like schizophrenia, narcissism, and you can see an organization that portrays this. It's not necessarily the people doing it, it's the system, the organization. But you wouldn't see that if you didn't look at the interconnections. If all you did was look through a microscope, you wouldn't see how these people, these elements connect. What is that connection like? What does it cause? What are the symptoms of the problems that it brings out, or maybe that it's drawn from? So we look at the linear, then we back up and we look at the non-linears. That's where it gets to be very fascinating for me. So let's look a little bit more at the system. Tufekti, and if anybody wants my notes, you can ask and I'll gladly send my notes. Just please don't grade them because though I'm a professor, I still make mistakes, even though I have edited it like twice. Also, you'll be able to get my reference list and be able to find these resources and see if I'm telling you the truth or not. Tufekti describes the system as systems thinking is how we look at interdependent, complex things or people or nodes or policies and how they interact over time. That's the main thing. We look at the elements, but it's over time. And we look at how they connect to these other elements around them over time. Tufekti also pointed out that this approach is not how normal academic fields look at things. Normally they use the analytical approach. That's changing. We've seen a lot of fields that now they're applying systems theory and they're actually finding new things that are emerging, new findings, new discoveries. Meadows defined a system as a set of things, people, cells, molecules, or whatever, that interconnected in such a way that they produce their own pattern of behavior over time. And I promise this hopefully will all make sense here in just a minute. Just bear with me. This is kind of like laying all the groundwork first. Meadows also gave the three components of a system. There are elements, which we've already talked about. Those are people, policies, anything like that. There's the interconnectedness. We've talked about that. And lastly, there's the function or purpose. That's the most difficult thing to find out. Why are these two elements connecting? If I'm in a relationship with somebody, why am I connected to that person? If I'm in a work team, why am I connected to these other team members? Why? What are we doing this for? That's not really clear. You could think, well, turn to the mission statement. Yeah, that gives you a little bit, but doesn't tell you the real why. In order to get there, it takes time, getting to know the different people, getting to know how they connect among themselves and with you. Okay, so any changes to a system's function or purpose harms that system. So if you're on a work team and you got this one direction you're going, you're geared up for that way, you're working cohesively, and suddenly you're told you're not doing that anymore, you're doing this exact opposite thing. It causes a form of almost psychological whiplash to that team. That unit, that team, then begins to be confused. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to interact with each other. And so if you're in a leadership position and you got to change direction, do it slowly. Your team will follow you. If you do it quick, you're going to lose them. And if you're a team member and there's a quick change, just hold on. It's going to be rough. It's going to be bumpy, but you'll get there. Just understand that as you look at the whole system, you'll understand why there's chaos. Now, as we'll see in a minute, chaos is actually a good thing, but not if it's done in this manner, where it's a quick, rapid change to the system's purpose. Peter Singh is like my hero. He is a professor at MIT, and he discussed that decades ago, he felt that society was blind to its own interconnectedness. Of course, with the advent of the internet and social media, now Singh says, yes, there's connection, but what kind of connection is it? Is it causing good, which social media has a good side, or is it causing bad? We talked about pulconomics and about how there's depression among, we talked about one group, but trust me, there's a lot more groups than just one that experience some sort of psychological distress due to social media. When we use the microscope and we look at the people in a system, the elements, we have to understand that this is a cause and effect approach. And just like riding a bicycle when we were young, there's instant feedback. We're riding the bicycle, we fall off, we get back up, we know we made a mistake and we try to correct it. The feedback was we fell. When we look at things using systems thinking, we don't use the cause and effect analytical approach. We use a synthesis approach of synthesizing all this information about interconnections. And the feedback comes slower there. Something that happens today may not produce the feedback for days, weeks, months, and at times even years. So we have to be aware of that. Feedback is a wonderful thing, but there's really two kinds. You've got a reinforcing feedback loop, and this is shown in causal diagrams, causal loop diagrams, which I'll show you one at the end. This balance, reinforcing feedback is a positive and a negative in there. And that causes a bad or even a good behavior to be perpetuated. Typically, it takes a bad behavior and puts a bad spin on it. And so really the reinforcing feedback loop is something to try to avoid. But a balancing feedback loop balances the whole system out and brings a positive approach, a positive atmosphere, a positive result. See, I already talked about some of this, which is good because of the compression, and I want to have time for Q&A. We talked about the delays. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that each person belongs to multiple systems. This is essential to remember. If I've got a problem in my personal relationship, my romantic relationship, it can bleed into other systems. Systems I have with my friends, systems I have at work, many things. Learning this helps us to be able to adjust how far we let it affect us And this is where psychological safety really comes in. And I don't have enough time to talk about it today, but in a team, there's 4 stages to psychological safety. You have the inclusion stage, which only prerequisite for that is that someone is a human being. You have the learner stage, which is where you learn that it's safe to make mistakes. And leaders, let your team make mistakes. You can fix most mistakes. When I was a sergeant in the Army, my guys made lots of mistakes, and I was able to fix practically all of them, except when they decided to do drugs, in which case there was nothing I was going to do. They were on their own because they typically lied to me in the process. But anyway, then you have contributor safety, which is where your team members can contribute new ideas. And then challenger safety, that's where they challenge status quo, but they have to feel safe. And who causes that? The leader. So that could be another topic for another day, but that's really it. Personally, I think about this when I'm dealing with the different systems I am a part of. I want to provide psychological safety for others and for myself. Now, there's chaos in systems. And most people, when chaos occurs, they cling to an old way of doing things for safety. Ever hear the saying, well, we never did it that way before? That's somebody responding to chaos. Uncertainty, that is chaos. When there's uncertainty, people grasp the certainty, as Barry Oshry pointed out in his wonderful book from 2007, which will be in my references. And he writes, certainty eliminates the angst of uncertainty. Beyond that, it leads to the inevitable battle of certainty versus certainty. What that, it sounds like gibberish, but what he's saying is when chaos occurs in a system, people tend to grab onto what they feel is certain, and that's typically an old process, procedure, or belief. And then it becomes a fight between, I'm certain about this old process, and then someone else on the team being certain about a new process. And they begin the struggle, and there's tension. That sounds bad. Really, it is not. Because out of chaos emerges new procedures, new ideas, new products, something called innovation. In order to gain creativity in a team, you have to allow for chaos to actually occur in a controlled sense. Personally, I don't run from chaos. I deal with it, and I know that something is going to emerge out of it. And it does. And it's always something that's better because I'm not clinging to an old idea. I'm not clinging to an old process. I'm open to new things. In nature, we can see how new variants of species, we'll just say with sparrows, emerges through a chaotic situation that impacts their population numbers. And yet they're stronger in the long run for it. A system can do the same thing. Barry Oshry further noted that we as a species tend to try to escape from uncertainty. I don't. I don't teach my students to run from it, and I'm not going to tell you to run from uncertainty. Embrace it. Hold on. When I was, oh my goodness, probably about 20 years ago, I bought a motorcycle. It was a big old bike. I did not know how to ride it, but I wanted one. So I sold my truck, I sold all my construction tools, and I bought a motorcycle. Stupidest thing probably most people thought, but it was the greatest thing for me because it taught me to hold on for dear life. When I got on that bike the very first day, I didn't know how to ride it. I held onto the handlebars and I went for a 70-mile ride. When you're on a bike at 70 miles an hour to the back roads out east of Georgetown, you feel like a projectile that's going to hit the ground and you're holding on for dear life. But by taking that situation like a bull by the horns, or in this case, a motorcycle by the handlebars, I taught myself a whole new skill. So when uncertainty comes, it can teach you new skills, open new opportunities. It can lead you to a whole better life. But so many times we try to cling to the past because we're safe there. So Systems thinking allows us to view things, these unique the situations, and find unique solutions to unique complex issues, because we're not looking at it as A, then B, then C. I do this, I learn how to ride a bike, I do this, I do that, I get a bike, then I ride for 5 minutes, and then the next day I ride. No, I don't do that. I say, scrap that. I know it's there. I do what I need to, got my license, stepped back, got the bike, and took off. That's embracing chaos. So how do we visualize a system? Well, think of it like a circle. I would say a sphere, but let's keep it two-dimensional right now. In this circle, you've got different points. Each one of those are person A, person B, person C. Could be policy A, policy B. It could be any number of things. And that's a team. And we look how everything's connected, but we see some lines that go outside of this circle. Where do they go? We step back and we see that they go to other departments. Person A might be connected to another department. Person C might be connected to senior management. And now we've got two more circles that intersect to our first circle. Wow, it's growing. So we step back further and we see it grows until finally our team is part of a department, part of an organization. And we say, we found the system. No, there is no end to the system. You step back and you look for more systems. That organization is part of an industry. Let's say Samsung and Google have an intersection point, typically in a court case, but they're intersected. They might be intersected over here with this or that. Wow, there's more systems. We step back. It grows and grows. And now we see all these connections. And person B right here might be connected to Samsung, might be connected over here to a regulatory commission, might be connected. And we're like, I didn't know this person had all these connections. Now we know why they have the knowledge they do or the experience they do, but also leads to something else that I know each of you are interested in: networking. You see, systems thinking isn't just part of systems theory. It's not just part of complexity theory. It's part of network theory. How things all connect. There's several types of systems graphs. Sometimes they got shapes. Sometimes they're just lines and words. But it grows and grows until finally it's this blob of information. But it's not a blob. Every bit of it's been tracked. Every bit of it is identifiable. I got notes attached to each node, to each person. I know why they're connected, and I can follow trends and I can see patterns. So where do you fit in? Like I said earlier, Oshry gave 5 levels that make up a system: tops, middles, bottoms, ends, providers, and customers. We're going to deal mostly with tops, middles, and bottoms today. When interacting with tops, we are not just dealing person to person. We are dealing with people living, sometimes struggling to survive in a world of complexity and accountability. Lots of issues to deal with. That's what Oshry said in his book about a top. You wonder why your boss may deny your requests? Probably has nothing to do about whether he likes you or not. His water heater might have broke at his house. His kitchen's flooded and he's grumpy. How would you know that? By getting to know people, by being open to hearing what's being said, by providing psychological safety. Though a leader should provide that, and it should start with the leader, oftentimes it doesn't. Oftentimes it begins with a team member. That's because a true leader does not have to be a manager. A lot of managers are not leaders. I'll say that implicitly. And not all leaders are in some position of authority. Sometimes you're the leader on a team. How do you lead? You lead by providing psychological safety for your team members and the manager. You set the example. The manager might catch on. Maybe the manager never catches on. Doesn't matter. You're not doing it for him. You're not even doing it for you. You're doing it for the team. So bottoms, what's a bottom? Those are the workers within a system. They're the janitors. They're the people that work in the fab. If you're making, my mind just went on me. Microchips. Okay. Oshie pointed out that bottoms can often feel invisible and vulnerable, where the top felt the complexity of the problem and the accountability. A bottom feels invisible and vulnerable. A bottom feels like the tops aren't listening to me. The tops don't see us. The tops, they don't care. We're just being used and abused. And that creates other things that happen within that subset within a system. But keeping it simple for now, the middles, these are middle managers. They're torn. They're torn between appeasing the tops and appeasing the bottoms. A middle never has what is requested of them. If someone in the bottom category goes to the middle manager typically has to go to a top or a supervisor to obtain what's needed to bring it back down to the bottom. And it goes the other way. So the middle is torn. They don't know what to do. Which way do we go? Customers can often feel neglected. They're like, the organization, these people, these providers, they don't care. They're not meeting my needs. Oshie puts it in his book that they feel righteously screwed, is what I think he said. He has a unique way of writing, but he's very, very brilliant on this subject. So customers can feel like they're being given a raw deal. What happens when that occurs? They go somewhere else. The business loses their money. But if you bring that customer in to being able to be part of a decision process about the products they're receiving, they feel more like part of a system and they have an allegiance. So now let's look, where do you sit within the systems you're a part of? Well, when I have a romantic relationship, which right now I'm just me and my dog, and I'm happy like that. But when I have one, I'm an end. Sometimes a top, sometimes a bottom. But it depends what's happening, what the situation is. Okay, so with my friends, well, I'm an end and they're an end. When I teach school to the university, I'm a middle because the dean is the top. My students are the bottom. In my class, I'm the top. And my students fit into the bottom category, and there is no middle in this instance. So I'm all these different.
I think they're going to pay me unemployment finally. Yeah.
Someone's mic is on. If someone could just, everybody make sure your mics are off. It'll make it easier. Thank you very much. All right, so where are you? Do you feel the complexity of a particular situation or the accountability? If you're feeling that, if you can't sleep at night because you're worried about how difficult this task is or this project or this idea, you're a top. If you feel like you're torn, that you never have what's needed for the people coming to you, you're a middle. If you feel like you're vulnerable, that you're invisible, you're a bottom. And there's nothing wrong with any of these places in there. They're all wonderful places to be. Once we realize where we are, we can function more effectively. Okay, so checking the time. So as we get here to the end of this, this is, believe it or not, this is a very brief overview, introduction of what systems thinking or systems theory is. I wish I could take you through every bit of it, but we don't have 100 hours together. With that said, there are resources online, and I'll recommend a few at the end that would really help you understand this much better and apply it. So let's look at an example from history. I use this example in my class. I love doing it. Who's familiar with Dracula? I've come to suck your blood. Who's familiar with Dracula? Okay, we're not talking about that Dracula. We're talking about Vlad III, Dracul. Vlad II received the title of Order of the Dragon. That's why Vlad II, Vlad III, they're called Dracula. It means Order of the Dragon. It was a position of nobility because they were nobles. We're going to look at the top, the middle, the bottoms, the ends, providers. We're going to look at an iceberg diagram, a systems graph, and a causal loop diagram to show you what a system is. So we've talked about Vlad. Look at Vlad II. He fought against the Ottoman Empire. He was a noble and he was a very hotly contested border area. We're talking the 14 and 1500s here. He was awarded the Order of the Dragon and is passed to his son, Vlad II. At one point, he lost to the Ottoman Sultan, and both of his sons were taken prisoner, where they were raised for years by the Sultan. Now, they were political prisoners, so they were not kept necessarily in a dungeon. They had received the best education the Ottoman Empire had, and Radu, Vlad III's brother, actually stayed with the Sultan and wound up fighting against his brother, Vlad II. So now we come here to Vlad III. This is Vlad II's son. This is who we think of as Dracula, Vlad Tepes. He was a top and a middle, just like his father. He fought against the Ottoman Empire to regain the kingdom and to protect his populace. He was on the throne, off the throne, on the throne. It was crazy. But he had a deep animosity towards the Ottoman Empire and towards his brother. He committed atrocious war crimes, including impaling at one point 20,000 Turkish soldiers. That's part of the legend that led into the mythical Dracula. His brother Radu was a middle, never made it to be a top. He was always a middleman. He served as an officer with the Ottoman Empire. We have the Hungarians. You got the king, he's a top. But within the Holy Roman Empire, he's a middle. And now we got the Ottoman Empire. The Sultan is the top. Now let's look at I'm going to share something now. As soon as I had it open. Good. Come back over here, click on that, click on that. I do this in my class. You think I'd have it figured out by now, but okay. And share. Okay, so what this is an iceberg diagram of what I just described to you. I gave you a brief account of the history. Now we're going to take it down into systems. We have here at the top, we got the visible manifestations. That's Vlad III. The trends and combinations. That's the invasions made by the Ottoman Empire and the work of the Hungarians and of Vlad III to fight them off. We got the causal relationships. Not casual, but causal. Vlad III had a relationship with the Ottoman Empire through the Sultan and the Hungarian rulers. We're not talking that these relationships are always positive because they weren't. This gives us a brief look. So you can take a historical situation, a TV show, your own life, your workplace, and you can break it down into these three categories. Okay? Next, you do what's called a causal loop design or diagram. Hopefully I'm going to try to, can everybody see this? There. Here in the middle, we have Vlad III, Dracul. He's a top. In the system here that's in the middle, if you see my mouse going around, who's the middle here? The boyars. That's what they called their nobles. The bottoms were the free workers or peasants and the slaves. Let me try to blow this up a little bit more here. I'm trying to, I think, there, we'll do it like this. Okay, so this is a system right here in the middle, but it's an intersection between these two circles. So it's a Venn diagram, right? On this side, you have the Hungarian kings. You also have other claimants to the throne. They, in relation to Vlad, were top. He becomes a middle. But when you come up here to the Holy Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Emperor was top. The Hungarian kings are a middle. Vlad is a bottom. Now he's fighting in conflict with the Ottoman Empire over here. That's a top. The Sultan would be a middle. Vlad would be a bottom. So whether you're a top, middle, or bottom depends from what point in the series of systems you are looking. If you're looking at the most immediate, you might be a top, a middle, or a bottom. If you're looking at your work situation, you might be a middle. In this case, we got a middle, Vlad III, caught between two ends, a Hungarian king and the Sultan. He's sandwiched right between them. Can't please either of them. Okay? This is a causal, wait, no, this isn't a causal loop design. This is a systems graph, sorry. This is what I use for systems graphing to get an idea of what I'm looking at. Now, this is a causal loop design. This tells us the actions. We have Vlad III. If we move right over this way, he's working to benefit his subjects. That's actually still to this day known as a national hero in that part of the world. But we move here, we have a conflict with the Ottoman Empire, with the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. Oh, what's this arrow going off? The scorched earth. That's a feedback loop. In this case, it's reinforcing. I don't have it done with the positive and negative signs, but when you do scorched earth, that's going to lead to negative consequences. If you recall, a reinforcement loop provides negative consequences. So we go over here. Now we have the Hungarian rulers. They're upset because now they're scorched earth and they're losing. They imprison Vlad. We think that this is negative, so it would be reinforcement, but it's not. It's actually balancing because the time he spent locked up led to him eventually being released, put back on the throne to lead again. So not everything we experience that feels negative at the moment truly is. When we step far enough back, it could actually be a positive. Now, I use this historical individual because you can use systems thinking to look at history, politics, religion, anything. You just got to break it down into its constituent components. Now, I'm not trying to get you to be experts at systems thinking today, but I want you to be able to start in your life to realize that the situations you're involved in at work or at home, how it's a system, how it impacts other systems that you're connected to, how you might be bringing some bad juju or some bad karma into these other systems. And you can find ways of limiting that to produce a positive effect. When you learn to see things holistically at work, at home, in your social life, in the world, things begin to make a little more sense because you can see all the little connections that led to this point. It's not A, B, C. It's A, Z, Q, R, T, S, L, M, N, O, 1, 2, 4. It's all over the place. But when we see that, we can assemble all the information. Now we know why this person acted the way they did. We can see why we acted the way we did, how we negatively impacted other systems. So we're going to end this here. And I want you to remember that chaotic events or periods of time, periods of uncertainty, they lead to higher creativity, emergent ideas. Just, you have to accept them. And it doesn't matter whether you're top, a middle, a bottom, or whatever. Be proud of where you're at in that system. Be the best you that you can be. Be a person on that team that the leader can count on, that the teammates can count on. You're not going to be biting people's backs. You're not going to be doing things that cause these reinforcement loops, that cause negativity. You want balancing loops that cause positivity. I recommend that you look into areas such as psychological safety for teams. There's a great book by Clark. Causal loop designs, flow and stock diagrams, systems thinking archetypes. You can find these online. You can find great videos with much better graphics than I could ever do, animations even, and see how you can apply some of these things that you've been introduced to today into your job seeking, into your employment, into your networking. What I'm showing you today are ideas that you can build upon through more research, just on YouTube. You can become a better job seeker. So we're going to end there. And like I said, my notes are completely available. So is my reference list. I would like to open up for some Q&A if we have time for that.
Yes, we do have time.
Okay, I do have a question.
Yes, fire away.
At the earlier, you were talking about an example of mental illness of an organization.
Mhm.
And I wondered if, number one, does that trickle down from the corporate leadership, like the CEO creates an environment that then perpetuates that trickling down through the organization? And if so, is an example of that the unethical behavior of Enron?
Oh, you're right. It can begin at the top and trickle down. And Enron would be a perfect example. So would MCI WorldCom, for those who remember that. However, it doesn't always start at the top and trickle down. Sometimes it starts in the bottoms and flows up, or it can start in the middle and go both ways. So it doesn't always have to start at the top. And
Do you have examples of those?
well, Enron would be a good one. One thing I would say is I could find some malignant narcissistic tendencies in the organization. Heightened ego, lack of empathy towards others, love bombing, and rage. I would say those Enron exemplified those four parts of the malignant narcissistic tendencies. Once again, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I've had to study. My degree is it's multifaceted. It's multidisciplinary. There's a ton of sociology, a ton of psychology, and then plenty of management. And this is all crammed into my second master's, my master of philosophy, my PhD, my doctoral work. And I've had to go through, and I've actually had to diagnose organizations. And it's interesting. And I think Enron probably is a great example. We could find other things in there. Let's just take it for a quick example. I would say that borderline personality disorder could also probably be found in there in some areas, because they portrayed one thing to their shareholders and one thing to the public, and yet reality was completely different than those.
I have another possible example. Glenda Jackson just died. So she was an actress, obviously, a much celebrated actress, but then she spent something like 17 years in Parliament.
Mhm.
And she said what she loved about Parliament was the constituency and representing them, et cetera, et cetera. But she said she did not love Parliament itself. And she said it was something like the egos that that were found there would never, they eclipsed anything that she ever found in the theatrical world. And she said it made, the egos were so overwhelming that it led to dysfunction.
Well, you actually find that people that excel as CEOs, and also as high-level politicians, that there is typically they rate higher. There's a series of 2 or 3 tests that individuals can be given to test for narcissism. What I do is, I don't know where it is right now, but somewhere's over here. I use the DSM-5, and that's the Diagnostic Manual for Psychiatric Conditions. And what I do is I look at an organization, I define the main things it shows. Is it showing egotism? Is it showing empathy? Is it showing lack of empathy? Is it showing greed? Is it showing, what's it showing? And then I look for the problem that best fits it. And then that also tells kind of a way to fix it. Unfortunately, a lot of CEOs in the Western world and a lot of politicians in the Western world have got this problem. They are very grandiose in the way they think. And then that causes them to not have empathy towards the constituents. Now, you do find individuals like the lady you just described that they honestly are there for the constituents. Those are the ones that are not going to be happy in this malignant, toxic environment of parliament. So yeah, you're right on the money with. That's a great example of that right there.
Okay. John Rothkeb, I thought I saw maybe at the very beginning as I was reading the bio of Brian that you might have had a question or had your hand up. Did I catch that or not?
No, wasn't me. No
Okay.
questions.
All right.
Thanks,
Is
Kathy.
there anybody else who has a question or a comment?
I wish I had come for the talk. I had to eat and everything, but I really I wish I'd come to this talk. I missed it, but I came here for the chat room at least. But
Well, sustenance is very important. Nutrition is, you have to have that. And if I recall, I think this is being recorded. So you could talk to them about how to be able to see that if that's something you want to do. Although I highly recommend wearing sunglasses because this dome is shiny. Are there any other questions? Anybody want to fire a question at me?
Oh, well, Brian, I just put in the chat that I said, some CEOs with grand ideas have no empathy and have ruined Twitter. So,
Oh, exactly. And that's also where social media using systems thinking comes in. Because you find somebody that has this grandiose mentality, personality, and they're malignant, and they turn to social media and they just spew things out there. And as opposed to them being things that are factual, they're things that they're feeling in the moment. There's a difference between what I'm feeling in the moment and what the reality is. I've got to take and understand my perceptions are real, they're valid, but that may not be reality. Reality is when my perceptions comport with your perceptions. And it's like a Venn diagram again. It's the intersection between my perceptions, your perceptions, that intersection, that's reality. And that's why there's so much out there in social media that is just off in one direction or the other. I don't care what political side you're on. I think people are nuts. And I think that we need to be more concerned about the constituents, the populace, rather than one's malignant, grandiose, toxic ideologies or dreams, aspirations, goals. I think another person that we could easily sit here and use this diagnostic tool on might be Elon Musk and how he's been doing things with Twitter and his own companies. Maybe that'd be something to look into, or, maybe even Bill Gates, because they don't have to be negative. They might be positive, but yet there still might be something negative happening from them. So I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I can learn from anybody, including malignant narcissists. I prefer not to be around them, though. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Recommendations for hair growth products?
I do have a question, Brian.
Yes.
So I want to comment on Kathy's question when she said, when she's talking about the example of Enron and MCI. I remember those, but those started from the top. Are there any example when chaos and certain starts from the bottom? It's always from the top because.
Well, no, it's not always from the top. When I was, this is not something that it's not a big company. We're talking about, in this case, it's a small subset within a system. When I was in the Army, there were two teams that did my job. What we did ground surveillance way out in no man's land for military intelligence. We had two teams. I was one team sergeant. There was the other team sergeant. Okay. His team, the bottoms, were malignant. That malignancy affected him, impacted the rest of the unit, all the way through. Anything that had to even touch that system was toxic. And that started at the bottom. It started with his privates. That doesn't sound right, but you know what I mean.
Right, but it's gonna fall under the leader. Though that's the leader is not doing their due diligence on a daily basis and not catching
Well,
the problems.
well, you're right. But remember, like I said, not every manager or supervisor or sergeant is an actual leader. Who
Right.
drives that team? That's the leader. And it can be a team member, in this case, low enlisted. And that drove that entire team, impacted the supply department, the admin department in our unit, impacted everything. And it started with the low enlisted on that team. My team, I got what were called the rejects. They were not jocks. They were people no one else wanted. I took them. I said, okay, we're going to be a team. You have a say at the table. But when we're in a specific situations, what I say goes. But when we're back in garrison, I want all the feedback from you so that we're better enabled to work in the field as a unit. My team had more awards, a better track record. We weren't causing problems throughout the unit, and it didn't cause a malignancy. Unfortunately, this team doing good, this team doing bad, bad always spreads faster than good.
Yep.
And so the good I was doing couldn't overcome the bad that was going on over here. I led that team because I chose to lead it that way. I did not let them lead me. The other team was led by these pig-headed, narcissistic, egotistical individuals that were low in rank, and it led up from there. Now, that's just one quick example. And
Right.
I've got I'll look for a book, I can't find it. I have books on case studies, and we could easily turn to Nestle, we could turn to Carnation, we could turn to places like that where the malignancy may not have started at the top, it could have started in the middle. One case I'm thinking about was when Carnation was going into Latin America with formula for babies. Long story short ending, that wasn't necessarily a thing that started at the top, it started in the middle, and it was exceptionally bad. We're not going to go into great detail right now, we don't have time for that. But so I would say Carnation is an example in that instance where it started in the middle. And I gave you an example where it started at the bottom. So while oftentimes it does look like it starts at the top, when we evaluate it, when we do all the look at all the interconnections, when we're looking at it in a nonlinear, dynamical, chaotic way, using synthesis, we can trace down, oh, it wasn't the leader this idea came from. It actually came from all the way down here and trickled up. And so even with Enron, it looks like the leadership did it. And I'm more inclined to say it was the leadership. But without sitting there and doing, 72 hours of systems graphing on it, I can't tell you emphatically, but it does look like the leadership did it. But anybody in a system can influence that system. Doesn't matter what position you hold. A janitor can actually influence a system for good or bad.
So really quick question again, system thinking, and that's too technical. And for the purpose of this session, and I like it, by the way, because I'm technical. Can I say system in your case is like a perspective? Depends how you look at things from different perspective, top, bottom, middle, left, right, through the lens of.
There is a lot of perspective when you do this. The thing you have to do is by stepping back to look at it holistically, you try to divorce yourself from the perspective. You try, myself as an academic, as a researcher, I try to identify my biases and then I try to avoid them. So when I do a systems graph, I'm not looking at, oh, I do not like this person and I let that influence me. I'm like, what connections are there? And I get into the nitty-gritty of it, void of my own perceptions or my own ideas about it. What do the facts show me? And everything I do, I want to have it verified through a reputable source because I might end up using it in a study in 5 years. So I'd rather have that all done. So I do try to move myself back so my own perceptions, feelings aren't involved. Most recently, I was in a relationship that ended. And I used systems theory, among other skills, in understanding that relationship, the problems and how everything related together. When I did that, I lost the passionate anger or feeling like I'd been done wrong. I lost some of that, but I saw the bigger picture and I said, I can't allow this to continue, because if I do, I know what it's going to cause in me. At the moment, I'm void of this because I'm looking as an academic. So yes, there's a weird blend between the perceptions and the feelings and what the reality is when we look at these things. And when I teach my students, we literally take 16 weeks to go through this with 2 lectures a week. That's 3 hours a lecture a week. So in 1 hour, I really can't go through all of it, but there is a technical side, but it's also so simple. I can watch Scooby-Doo and I can look at the connections right there. Doop, boop, boop, boop. I can't watch shows anymore without seeing interconnectedness. I can't. And so once you learn the skill, it just starts being automatic. And it doesn't matter. I'm watching Blackadder or Monty Python, and it's boom, boom. I'm catching all these interconnected things. And it just blows my mind. I can't see things the same way anymore.
Yeah, good point.
We had
Thank
a
you.
question of, is conflict resolution part of systems thinking?
It can be. It can be. If you've got node A and node B, so 2 people, and the interconnection between them is one that is could be seen as being negative, toxic, whatever you want to call it, you got to dig into each of them to try to figure out what connections this is actually coming from. And then how do you resolve it? How do you get these 2 people to put their differences aside, to put whatever they're feeling from other systems aside? What I would do is basic conflict resolution. I'd get both people, put them in 2 different rooms and bounce between them and say, okay, you got time. What is going on in your life? What's really bothering you? It's all confidential. It's not going anywhere. Go to the next person, do the same thing. Then I sit there and go, now here's a link between what's happening here with this person on an outside system and how they're treating this person. I've got it. Now I go in and I help that person adjust how they're presenting themselves in that environment, that work environment. And that would be a form of conflict resolution. Good question.